I hope you don't think that I am rude. I look at the budget and I think I'm gonna rule this. But sometimes I'm penny wise, pound foolish. That was really sloppy, and those lyrics, I just made those lyrics up. Yeah. We'll give it one more minute for everybody to show up by playing some appropriate kind of a bluesy thing. Well, hello, Shawnee Groves. Hello, Coy K. Hello, Lord of Creole. Welcome back to the Goodstream. We're gonna get cheap. We're back to the Goodstream where we're gonna get cheap. Hey, Leah. And hello, Michelle. Hello, Donna, Dixon, and Libby, and Aris Rhoda. We're gonna get cheap. Oh yeah, here we go. That's some good style with a thumbs up and a sunglass man. Thank you, Willem, for the encouragement.
Thank you, Willow.
Thank you, guys. I guess we probably better talk.
Gotta get boring. Yeah.
Thank you, Perry.
You are welcome.
Much appreciated. We're running a little bit late tonight. I wanted to start this a little bit earlier, but I had some important things we had to do. Super, super important things. So I've said goodnight to my family, and except for the Strat player. And we are going to talk about when does it make sense? When does it make sense? I'll leave it to Bella says, I'm going to play that for my sweet potatoes. Yes, as you recall, sweet potatoes do appreciate it when you sing to them. That's the only thing that really makes them grow well. So, when does it make sense to get cheap? I've been reading a book that's kind of interesting. Some of you guys probably know the book The Millionaire Next Door, where a writer named Thomas Stanley back in the 1990s looked around and tried to figure out where are the millionaires in the United States? What do they do? How do they live their lives? How do they save their money? How do they invest their money? What type of business are they in? What neighborhoods do they live in? How long do they stay married? What do they believe in? What is their philosophy of life, etc.? And he did an overview and revealed that a lot of the people that you think are millionaires may actually be negative on their finances, right? So somebody might actually make a lot of money, but could be incredibly in debt. So the guy with the $1.2 million house who is putting in a pool next door may actually make $300,000 a year, but might be spending $400,000 or $500,000 a year and is in big trouble. He may be way more in the hole than he actually has equity. And the guy that just seems like the kind of normal guy that lives in the house next door may actually be a millionaire. He might run his own plumbing company. He might be doing HVAC. He might have a junkyard business. He might own a convenience store or a daycare. Might be, it's just about anything, right? So you look at and you go, where do these people do and how do they spend their money? And one of the things that keeps coming back is that people that are good at managing money, they may be cheap, but they know when to spend money and what to spend money on. And so I often read books that are outside of my main field of gardening. I read a lot of history. I read some books on business a little bit, even though I wouldn't say I'm really much of a businessman. And this book kind of piqued my interest. This book is called The Millionaire Mind, and it is the follow-up book, which has more information on what millionaires think and what they do. It's a follow-up to The Millionaire Next Door, and it's pretty interesting to read something like that. But I used to read a lot of fiction. I don't really read very much fiction anymore. I did enjoy reading a series of novels by Evelyn Waugh, who wrote Brideshead Revisited and multiple other novels that are quite entertaining and very, very interesting psychologically. But I read this year multiple biographies. I read multiple books on the French Revolution and biographies of some of the characters that were involved and how they got to where they were. And I read multiple biographies of saints and what they did in their lives and how they set apart eternal treasure for the future. And then I just found this book at a thrift store and I said, this looks pretty interesting. I think I'll read this. But it's been pretty interesting how it actually ties into some of what I wrote in the book Minimalist Gardening. I'm not a millionaire. If I continue at my current rate, I might become a millionaire by the time I'm dead. And that would be nice to pass on to my kids. But some of the ideas of buying assets, not buying liabilities, make sense. You can be penny wise and pound foolish. Let me give you an example. When I was much younger, I had a 1982 Cutlass Supreme. It was the second car I ever got. And back then, it wasn't quite the classic that it is today. And I had the V6 version of it, and it was a good solid car. But I was out with it, and it suddenly stopped working properly, and it leaked a whole bunch of water and died on me. And I poured a bunch more water into it, and I was able to get it home. It wasn't that far away. I don't exactly remember how I got it home, if I drove it or not, but I got it back to the house, and it would not drive. So from looking at it and asking a friend, what could be the problem? It wasn't a pipe. It wasn't the radiator. It was actually the water pump. So I thought, well, you know, I'm pretty smart, and I don't want to spend the money to have a mechanic put in a new water pump. I could go and buy a Chilton's manual, which gives an overview of this car. I could go down to AutoZone and get a Chilton's manual, and I could buy a new water pump for it and put it in myself. So I called into work. No, I hadn't called into work yet. I think it was a Friday. So it got to Saturday. I was like, Saturday, I'm going to put in a new water pump. Well, yeah, some of you already know what's going on here, right? So I got the water pump, and I started pulling parts out. I started pulling things out of the front of the car to get to where the water pump was. And I finally accessed the water pump, and I got a ratchet, and I pulled the first bolt off it, and it came off. Then the second bolt, I twisted it, and the head of the bolt snapped off. Oh, I snapped the bolt off. Okay, so I tried the next one, and it turned. Another one snapped off, another one turned, another one turned, another one snapped off. Anyhow, I ended up snapping off multiple bolts inside of the engine block. I got the thing off, but those bolts had given up from overheating or something over time. And so I called my grandpa, who was a carpenter, but he knew some things about mechanics. And I said, what do I do when I have broken off bolts inside of it? And he said, well, get a drill bit and drill the holes out. And then you're going to use my tap kit. I've got a tap kit that will recut the little threads inside of it. So I went over there and I did that, and I figured out how to do that, and I got bolts to screw in and out again. It took a long time, and it ate up all of that Saturday, and it ate up the Sunday. When I got home from church, I had parts all over the yard, and I was back at it again. Got to Monday morning, and I had not been able to get the new one on. I got it on, but I called my boss. I said, I'm running a little late. I'm going to try and get this thing on here and pull this car back together. I'm really sorry. And I ended up putting it back together. I put a little seal on it and some little goo that they had given me that was supposed to seal it back together and hold it. I put it back together, and I started the car, and it started leaking water again. And it was leaking around the new seal that I'd put in. Oh no. So now I had to pull all the stuff out again, and I pulled it, and I looked at it, and I'm like, I put the seal in, what in the world is going on? Well, my neighbor down the road, his name was Ray, and he had his own demolition company. He had a dump truck, and he had a bobcat, and he would go and knock down old buildings and grade yards and do that kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, he's probably going to know. When I asked him, I was like, Uncle Ray, what do I do? We all called him Uncle Ray. And he's like, I'll come down, I'll help you. And he looks, he goes, okay, that's the wrong seal stuff that you put on there. So we're going to have to do this and that and the other thing. So he went out with me, and we got another seal, and we put it on, and he helped me put it back together, and I got it running. But by that time, I think I missed 2 days of work. And I had a lot of stress involved. By that time, I didn't save money. But I did learn something. I learned I never want to do another water pump again. But I thought, hey, I put model airplanes together. If I got a diagram, I could do this. And I attacked something without the proper knowledge in place to do it. And it was outside of my skill set. And I was trying to save money, but I did not save money. It's rather like saying, you know what, I'm going to save money by putting in a new gas water heater in my house, but you don't know how to work with gas, and you've never put in a water heater before. You may actually manage to do it. Hopefully it doesn't blow up. Hopefully you don't do anything wrong. But it's not really the sort of the sort of thing you should necessarily do without the knowledge in place. And that beat me up. I just was like, oh man. Now I did some other things that worked out okay. I changed my own oil. I was able to replace the brake pads on a car a couple of times. But I realized I'm not really a mechanic. And when it comes to gardening, I tried different things over the years that I thought would be money well spent to save me trouble. And they ended up not being money well spent to save me trouble. I ended up wasting money on things that I probably shouldn't have wasted money on. But there are times where I've made a significant purchase that has worked out. For example, the greenhouse that we put in was expensive. It cost about $5,000, I think, for the greenhouse, and I realized that I was not skilled enough to put it in, so I hired a friend of mine and his wife who had put in a greenhouse before that was very similar, and they helped me put the greenhouse in. I paid them a good chunk of money to help me. By the time I had done all the materials and put in the weed block and framed it and all the other stuff that went along with it, plus paid for the labor, and we spent about a month of work, and they did a lot of the work, it cost about $10,000 to put the greenhouse together. If I was using that greenhouse to keep my orchid collection alive, it would have been straight expenditure. If I use that greenhouse just to start plants to put in my garden in the spring, that greenhouse would have been ridiculous overkill. It would have been a vanity project. But I put in a professional greenhouse, and within a year, I was able to pay back the money that greenhouse cost by selling plants that I propagated and moved through it over time. Now that greenhouse is a paid off asset. But it's not an asset if it's just sitting there, if it's a vanity project. If it's just, I just want a greenhouse. I just want a greenhouse. If you could find a way to buy something that doesn't waste your time, that makes you freer, it's different. If you own an acre of property and you figure out that you're mowing a big lawn in the front yard and it takes you 5 hours to do the yard with a push mower, but if you had a riding mower or a zero turn, it would take you 1 hour. You could calculate out, what do you think your hours are worth? What is your time worth? And calculate, would it be worth it if I can keep this thing running? And you figure the gas, you figure the maintenance, etc. Is it worth it? And you may say, you know what, the push mower is just the way I'm going to go. And you may not have the money to buy the zero turn. But if you do buy the zero turn, and now you have much more time on Saturday, and maybe it's not even a monetary concern. Maybe it's I'm not spending as much time with my family as I would like. If I could mow the lawn in the morning and go out to hang out at the park with the kids, or go bowling, or something like that, do something cool. If we could go out, if I could go to more of their baseball games because I have more time, you may be able to justify it that way. But we have to watch it too, because we often have something that we want, and then we make up a series of excuses on why we want to buy that and why that's just what we need. Instead of reasoning our way to the purchase, we decide what we want, and then we make up excuses for the purchase, and we claim that it's reasoning. If you had 2 acres, now that zero turn is really looking like a good idea. But is it the only idea? What if you allowed part of your acreage to become woodlands? What if you decided to only mow a certain area around your lawn and only mow the rest of it occasionally? Maybe you mow it once a year, but the rest of it is going to become a pollinator area. Maybe you overseed it and let it become a pollinator area. Or what about this? What if you only have a 1/4 acre yard and you want to buy a zero turn? Well, you say, well, I mean, you might as well push mow that thing, or pay a kid to push mow it. Listen, I'll pay you $35 if you cut my lawn every 2 weeks or something. It might be worth it to do that, and you don't spend hardly any money at all, because how many times you could pay a kid 100 times for a $3,500 zero turn, and then maybe you haven't even bought a good zero turn for $3,500. You're probably looking at $5,500 or something. But what about this? What if you have 2 or 3 neighbors, and you say, listen, I could cut your lawn too, if you give me how about $40 every 2 weeks? I'll mow your lawn too. And you know that you could mow their 1/4 acre lawn in 20 minutes. Then maybe you mow 2 or 3 lawns, and you mow your lawn, and now the zero turn has become an asset instead of a liability, right? So you kind of look at it and go, yeah, maybe. And if you buy the zero turn, you don't want to buy the cheap one. We were able to get a used Skag mower. The previous owner of this property had a lawnmower that was, I think, about a $10,000 to $11,000 lawnmower. It was a gigantic mower. It was a big, bad boy mower, and it was a beautiful mower, just gorgeous. But it was expensive, and she loved to mow. She had the lawn like a carpet all the time. Well, I didn't want to do that, but I knew that I was going to have to buy something. I was able to get a used Skag mower that was probably about 10 years old, that looked beat, but it still cut well. I had it checked out by a mechanic. I paid $2,000 for the mower, and I have been able to mow with it now for almost 3 years. Now, currently it's sitting in the front yard not working because one of the tires went out. But I got multiple years out of it. I did have to do some maintenance. I had to pay for a couple of things to be fixed a couple of times. Is breaking even? Is probably breaking even. But I just couldn't see spending that much money on a mower, and I also knew I was going to be growing some crops in some of these areas. I planted a big patch of sugarcane and then another patch of sugarcane, and I planted a little orchard, and I planted a food forest. And a lot of those areas I don't necessarily need to really mow, like I have to mow the little piece of lawn, the 2 acres or so of lawn that needs to be mowed, and then there's another acre or so that is rougher that I mow less. So you kind of look at it and go, okay, is this thing really worth it, or do I just want it right now and I'm going to justify it? So I think it generally makes sense to spend the money if you know that it is going to more than pay for itself in your time. And you got to remember that you calculate in your time. Somebody asked us, what do you do with your cows? Do you milk the cows? Yes, we milk the cows for over a year, and we got all of our milk. We got cheese, we got butter, we got yogurt. We did a lot with the milk, but it was taking my wife 2 hours per day, and sometimes kids would fill in, but it was 2 hours of labor per day to milk the 2 cows. And looking at that compared to the value of my wife cooking, homeschooling, and teaching the kids, and not being tied all the time, and then looking and going, well, yeah, but we really need raw milk. I feel like the raw milk is good, so we really like to know where our milk came from, and it's a really rich, creamy milk because they're Dexter cows. So, yeah, we're just going to keep doing it, even though, it's like monetary-wise, well, I guess we could just go buy Walmart milk, but it was pretty nice. Well, then, we find a friend of ours has a dairy and has added more cows to the dairy, and the friend makes us a really, really good deal on the gallons of fresh milk from the Jersey cows. That Jersey cow milk is excellent. So anyhow, we get 10 gallons of milk per week. Now, you guys are not going to get this kind of a deal usually, but because we agreed to 10 gallons per week for $50. That's ridiculously cheap. But they were friends of ours. It's very convenient. They have a lot of extra milk, and we were able to just give them a consistent, we will buy 10 gallons per week, every week. So when I figured out the time, I said 14 hours per week that my wife was working, and at that time, we had a newborn as well. It was a lot of effort and stress and time on her, but now we could also get the milk for a really good price, and we knew that they weren't feeding sprayed hay and all that kind of stuff. We went, oh man. Woo, okay. All right, we're gonna make a decision here. Would that time be better spent getting up in the morning and doing, she gets up early, she spends some time in prayer, she gets the baby up, takes care of the baby, gives the baby to one of the kids, makes breakfast or has one of the kids make breakfast, plans out the day's schooling. There's a lot that goes on in that morning time. And then in the evening, after she's taking care of the many things that she does during the day, then she would have to go back out and milk the cows again. So, yeah, this is the way we do it. It didn't make sense at that juncture, at that time. So recently I've done some videos where I've talked about, ways to save money. We've done some live streams on it. And I did a video on, 7 ways you're wasting money on your garden. And one of those things was raised beds. If you spend the money to make big, tall, raised beds, and you don't work in the soil, and you go out and you buy a bunch of soil, and you buy fancy beds, you get some cedar, you have to build the beds, like you have to do carpentry before you garden, that's often not necessary. And so I say, you don't need to go out and make these really amazing beds and then fill them with all kinds of purchased soil and go out and get your load of mushroom compost or anything like that. You can do sheet mulching on the ground and build lasagna gardens. You can dig up an area a little bit, loosen it up, and make nice mounded beds and just plant in them, and there's really no purchase of materials. But some people have said, I'm old. I like a raised bed. I like a taller bed. My back hurts, or I had an injury, and I have to garden in raised beds, so I disagree with you. Well, guess what? I don't disagree with you. It may not be the best for the person that is healthy and fit with somewhat decent soil, or somebody that wants to take the time to improve the soil, etc. But if you back up a little bit and you say, I'm not going to garden in the ground because I don't feel physically capable of it, or I'm gardening on top of rocks and I just feel like going up, or I just don't think I would want to deal with the Bermuda grass or whatever else, and I just want to make some nice raised beds, and that's what got me gardening. That's great. That's great. That, in your case, is probably a worthwhile investment for you. And if you have extra money and you prefer to build beautiful beds, there's something valuable to building something beautiful that you love that doesn't necessarily have to have a monetary value on it. If you want to make a really cool keyhole garden and you wanted to make it out of stacked blocks of granite or whatever you wanted to do, and it gives you a beautiful herb garden that brings you satisfaction and love and joy, etc., that's fine. That's fine. It's just some suggestions. You have to judge in your own case, is it worth it to me if it's going to work this way? Is this going to be worth it to me? So I like to keep things as simple as possible and keep the goal in mind is that I want food for my family that has not been sprayed, that is not GMO, that I feel good about feeding to my children. Somebody told me recently that their child was staying at home. He was a teenager. He was at home and grabbed a container of strawberries out of the fridge and didn't have strawberry allergies. But he grabbed a container of conventional strawberries out of the fridge and ate that container of conventional strawberries. Just sat there and ate strawberries. And then started to develop an allergic reaction to them and started to feel short of breath and feel sick after eating them. And they came home and they checked him out, got him a little Benadryl, and he got better. But they were thinking, you know what, maybe it's because of what is sprayed on those strawberries. They said, did you wash the strawberries? He was like, wash the strawberries? You're supposed to wash the strawberries. But, I mean, eating a whole container of strawberries is maybe not a good idea anyways, but it could have been worse because who knows what's in them. You know, what is a tolerable amount of pesticide according to the current regulations? You may be sensitive to that. You might get sick. Of course, you know, I wouldn't eat an entire container of prunes or dates or plums or strawberries or any of those things, just in general. But you never know, right? Like, some people have allergies to things just because of the way that it is grown. There's a lot of conjecture about this with wheat. A lot of people have these wheat allergies, these gluten allergies, and they just get sick. They don't feel well when they eat wheat. I don't think that this is some sort of... People want to pick on the millennials and be like, oh, you millennials, oh, you'll have to have everything gluten-free. Oh, you're such precious snowflakes. You're such tender little snowflakes. Yeah, well, if you look at the way wheat is grown and the way wheat has been bred for the last decades and the amount of glyphosate that is used, I think that there's more to it. People have said they've gone overseas and they've eaten bread and they felt just fine. But then when they eat wheat in the United States, conventional wheat, conventional bread, they feel horrible. So, growing things at home, you at least know what's going into it. You don't have the control over every single thing in the world. You don't know what's coming down with the rain. You know, your soil may not be the most perfect soil in the world, etc. But there's always something, right? There's always something that's not good. But the idea is to do as well as you can in a busted system without driving yourself insane. People send me conspiracy theory type stuff all the time, and now I have no problem with conspiracy theories. I find many of them are incredibly entertaining. Some of them are probably true. But there are people that spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about what horrible thing they are going to do to them next, and how everything is going to be awful and terrible, and there's just no way out. So if you save rainwater, it's probably got chemicals from the sky in it, and maybe it's got microplastics in it, and maybe it's going to have some sort of this in it or that in it. But if you use well water, it's going to have fluoride and chloramine and leftover pharmaceuticals in it. And if you have this thing that you do and this thing that you do, this is poisonous and this is poisonous and this is poisonous. Like there's a poisonous wax on this, and then they spray this on this and they spray this on that, and then you know, can you compost, you know, conventional produce because it has pesticides in it? And you end up trying to be so pure and perfect that you can't eat anything. That's probably the safest thing, would just be to not eat anything whatsoever. You just kind of have to do your best and not get too hung up. But with the concept of minimalist gardening, here's the book, Minimalist Gardening. I'll put a link to the book above. If you don't have this book, please buy this book. You'll find it very useful. It will give you a philosophy of gardening that just is an angle of keeping it simple. If you think about things in terms of what your goal is to do the best you can, growing the best food you can in your backyard. That's probably a primary goal for most people. I would like to have food in my backyard that I grew myself, that I know wasn't sprayed with anything. That's a pretty good goal. For some people, they tend to lean more towards health. I want to have the absolute highest quality, most nutrient-dense food possible. I want to eat organically. For other people, it's more, I would like to take some of the money off of my grocery budget. Maybe I'm a saver. Maybe I have multiple kids and I want to make sure that I can feed them, and everything is just so ridiculously expensive now and the price of everything has gone up. That's why I want to do it. Some people just like to garden because they love to garden, and the monetary concern is not that important to them. They're not really saving much money on it. Maybe it's just a beautiful place, and they're gardening because it's cheaper than going to a psychiatrist. I'm going to go out to the garden barefoot, and I am going to tend to my dahlias. And that can be fine too. Because there's a value in that that's not necessarily a monetary value, right? But often it's a combination of most things. I keep finding different reasons that I actually like to garden. Part of it is I like to taste and try things that I can't normally get, things I can't buy. I like to grow things that I can't buy. So I might grow, like one year we grew Barry's crazy cherry tomato just because it was really cool to watch it grow, and you've never seen anything like that in the store, so we grew it. We grow our own stevia. The kids like to go out to the garden. They call it the sweet plant. They go and take a leaf off the stevia, and they take a leaf off of a mint plant, and they put them together, and it's like eating a mint candy. And that's just enjoyable to the kids. Does it save us money? Well, we're not buying candy anyways, but it entertains the children, so that's cool. My daughter grows plants to grow her business. So the Good Gardens seed store is my daughter's business, and she's been running that for 4 years. She has her beds of Everglades tomatoes. She has beds of daikon radishes. She grows flowers, she grows plants for the cuttings, and she adds different things that she thinks people would enjoy and want to buy from her, and she grows her own income by that. It's not just a matter of saving money, it's actually a matter of making money. And if you look at the reviews on her store, people love what she does. So she's actually paying her bills, and she's also making a lot of people happy by getting them seeds that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So there's a lot to think about when you think about, when does it make sense to spend money. So let's take a look at another one. People would say you don't need a tractor, and a lot of people don't need tractors. I probably don't need a tractor. But because I really wanted a tractor, and I saved up my money for years to be able to buy a tractor, literally for years, I saved money. I bought a tractor. I bought a used tractor. And I can do things faster than I could before. It would be kind of hard to not have a tractor at this point because of how much work we get done with it. When we use a tractor, I can do with a tractor the amount of work that would have taken me 3, 4, 5 days. I can do that in a couple of hours. That is cool. But I finally have enough acreage to make it worth, possibly, having a tractor. When we planted our potatoes, I did not have a way to plant them with the tractor. We tilled an area up, and then I dragged my row maker that we built out of 2x4s and a 4x4 and some scrap wood, and it's got 2 points that stick down to the ground. It's in the thumbnail of this video. It's got 2 points that stick down into the ground 3 feet apart, and I just walk as straight as I can backwards and drag it. I got the idea from a guy with a Mennonite guy, I think he's Mennonite, with a channel, so I think he's called Simple Phil. And I saw his row maker some like 10 years ago, and I built one. And then I built another one based on the same plan later. And I cut those lines, but then I had to get all of my kids out there, and my friend Leo came over as well, and with shovels and rakes and grub hose, we dug trenches. And we dug something like 8,000 or 9,000 linear feet of trenches. Let me just do these numbers really quick. It was 100 and maybe that's not right. It was 150 foot times 7. Now there we go. 1,050 feet of trenches. It took a long time. It took a long time. And then we planted our potatoes, and then we went back over them, and we filled in all of those rows over there, and then we started hilling them up in a few more weeks, and we spent a lot of time. I had the idea, if I could grow enough potatoes, maybe I could sell some potatoes. Maybe we could put away enough potatoes for an entire year. Maybe I could overcome the fact that we have such bad soil for potatoes that if I overplanted potatoes, we would have enough potatoes. And that was a lot of work. But then I found out there is an attachment for the tractor that makes beds. It's got 2 discs like this, and I could drag it down, and it will throw up a mound about this tall in just a perfect mound. So I got this thing, $475, and it saved days of work. In 20 minutes, I had mounded all 1,050 foot of potatoes. 1,050 foot in about 20 minutes or so. You just drive right down. There goes a minute. And you've got a mound. You turn around, you line up really carefully. You go, and it throws it up onto the sides and did it. So that $475 saved me probably 3 days of man labor. And then that thing just doesn't break. It's a really heavy duty industrial type tool. We could just park it when we're not doing that. But I also found that it was really good to make mounds for yams. It's really good to make mounds for sweet potatoes or for watermelons and other things. You just go, you drag it, and you pull it behind. In the past, I did everything with hand tools. We had my first yard had an acre that was a yard that was like 1/10 of an acre. I didn't have that house for very long. I was able to buy another house that was smaller, and I sold that house and moved to a smaller house because I moved out of state. Actually, I took a job, and we worked all with hand tools. Didn't make any sense. We had maybe, a garden that was a few thousand square feet, and then if you were to go and buy, I didn't buy really anything except I got an old used tiller at one point, and I used the old used tiller. I think I paid $200 for it, and I used that to do some stuff, but then it broke on us, so I was like, you know what, I would have been better just using hand tools this whole time and deep mulching it, because the tiller was tearing up the clay and it really didn't work very well. So I went back to just using a fork and a spade and a rake, and just gardening that way, and we were just fine. Sometimes when you have automated tools, it makes you till up more area than you really should be trying to manage, and you end up just doing things poorly over a large space just because you have the power tools. You end up just shredding a bunch of stuff just because, when you have a tiller, everything looks like it could be a garden bed, and then you end up with a huge mess of weeds, and it's totally not worth it. You really didn't do much except give yourself a lot of extra work and wreck the grass. So the next place we got had a 1 acre yard. The next place we got when we moved overseas was only a half an acre. So it's hand tools, hand tools, hand tools, hand tools. Pretty much all hand tools. Until we ended up with some acreage, and I was able to borrow a tractor, and I realized how much work you could really get done with a tractor, and how much you could care for, and how much extra surplus you could create if you had the ability to do it. So does the tractor make sense in our case? It may get there in another 5 years. Right now, it definitely saves us the time. But we got a lot of enjoyment out of it, and if I decide I don't enjoy it anymore, I will sell it. some things make sense to buy and some things don't. And you have to also look at what is your station in life. If you're trying to save money and you just go out and you keep buying stuff and throwing money in the hole to save money, like for example, if you said, you know what, we could eat more fish. Fish are really good for us, and it would really help with the budget if we could eat more fish. So I'm gonna buy a bass boat. Probably doesn't make sense. But if you were to buy a cane pole, or even better, build a cane pole, it would make sense. Maybe you want a good casting rod. You know, you get it. You pay $200 for a good casting rod and a box of lures, and you really like fishing, and you find a good fishing spot, and you fish until you pay it back, and then you keep fishing with it, and maybe that casting rod was worth a couple $1,000s. Maybe you also get a great enjoyment from it. Maybe it also helps your mental health, etc., to be out there on the water. It's not bad. But you should always think, is there a solution without me buying a solution first? Is there a solution if I buy a solution that makes more sense, that will pay for itself? Because poor people buy liabilities. Rich people buy assets. So if you buy a house and you pay top dollar for your house and you buy it in a marginal neighborhood and the value of the house is really eclipsed by the fact that you're paying a mortgage payment that you can't really afford, you're paying extra insurance, you're paying this and that and the other thing, plus you have to keep the house up, then you have to, you know, you're pouring it into it. The house actually is a liability. Yes, it is an asset in that it has value if you sold it, but if you have a mortgage on it and you buy a $200,000 house and you pay $558,000 for it over the length of the mortgage, plus you've gotten it repainted, plus you had to put in a new septic tank, plus you had to mow the lawn, plus you had to keep the power on, etc., 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 it may not actually be worth it. But if you were to buy a house at a really good deal and then you were able to rent half of it out, I knew somebody that lived in Boston where it was expensive, but he was able to get a deal on a 3-story house, a deal for the neighborhood. He rented out 2 of the stories to separate people, and he lived in one of them. And that paid the mortgage on the house. Now that house is really coming into asset territory instead of liability territory. So if you buy a tool for the garden, like I would say my machete, definitely an asset. It's a really cheap tool and it's more than paid for itself over and over and over again, and I'm still using the same machetes I've been using for years, provided I haven't lost them in the yard somewhere, which has happened to some of my machetes. If you buy a tractor and you don't go and get the top of the line tractor, you get a used tractor, but you get a solid tractor, you get one that's got low hours on it, and you go ahead and you're going to use it to make compost and to move materials and not have to hire somebody else to do it for you. Maybe you use it to cut hay, maybe you use it to cut whatever. You may be able to amortize out the value of that and say, okay, this thing is worth doing it. But sometimes we just want to buy something. And then, of course, we make our justification for it. I just deserve this and I should have it. Well, if you have the money and you enjoy it, that's fine. I'm not going to say that that's a bad thing to do. Life is short. Money is just a tool. Money is just a tool. But the less you can be in debt, the better, because you're paying somebody else for the thing that you own and you don't really own it until you pay it off. The less, and if you're at a point where you're already in debt and you think, I'm just going to buy more, I'm going to put more debt up, more debt up, more debt up, because you just keep wanting things, you got to stop doing that. It's going to just kill you and it's going to take away your peace. You would be better off living in a paid-off trailer than you would in a house with a pool and expensive electric bills and a really nice neighborhood, etc., that you just simply cannot afford. That if any disruption happens in your life, you're not going to be able to pay the mortgage. You're not going to be able to fix the pool. You don't want to call the insurance company to have them fix something, because if they drop it, prices go up, whatever. You got to remember that money's just a tool, and I mean, and you got to remember there's a spiritual aspect to it as well. If you are honoring to God in what you do, He doesn't say that He's going to make you rich, but He will take care of you. And if taking care of you means you need to be extremely poor for a period of time because it purifies your soul and helps you deal with things and helps you have better trust in Him and teaches you things and gives you great lessons to teach to your children later, He will totally let you be poor. Because remember, the money's just a tool, right? Your soul is immortal. The money is not immortal. Your stuff is just stuff. Somebody is going to get it when you die anyways, and somebody may get it before you die. It's just stuff. So if you take Him at His word, like for example, when we had our first 2 children, we were so broke. We did a lot of gardening. A lot of my gardening methods came from the fact that we were trying to feed our family. I was a freelancer. I did not do very well. There was an economic downturn in 2008, but the ripple effect started hitting 2006, 2007, and we really, really were broke. We ended up renting a trailer for a period of time and trying to hold our finances together while my wife was pregnant with our 3rd child, who just turned 18, which is amazing. I told him he was the first kid I actually had to go into debt to pay for. I wasn't truly in debt. I had a little bit. I had worked a job and I had a little bit of retirement set aside, and I had to cash it out to pay the midwife to buy the baby. I told him it was a great investment. I bought a baby for cashing out that little bit of money that I had, which is fine. It was great. It was a good trade. But we could have just said, you know what? I know God says children are a blessing, but I obviously can't afford them. Well, we kept having children, and we kept working as hard as we could, and we had bad years, and we had good years, and we had bad years, but we never went all the way hungry. And I think that's because every time that we really hit the edge and we're like, we're not going to make it, we would just pray over it, and something would happen. Sometimes something really funny, like this guy brought a whole bunch of food over to us, but he didn't want to tell me where he got it from. I'm like, where did you get this food? It'd be better if you didn't know. Did you rob a grocery store? No, he was dumpster diving. He was dumpster diving, but he would clean all the food up as best, it was hilarious. I ended up taking a crash course in dumpster diving from him, and filled the freezer and the fridge. Yep, I've been that cheap, man. I have been that cheap, and that was a huge help. I found out they'll throw away an entire bag of potatoes because one potato has gone rotten, and you could go and pull bags of potatoes out of the dumpster behind the grocery store, wash all those potatoes carefully, throw out the bad ones, and you could eat potatoes for an entire week. Is it savory? Not really. One time I just took all the potatoes and I planted them in rows, and I grew a big crop of organic potatoes from dumpster Aldi potatoes. So yeah, we've been there. And I don't think anybody has any more value because he has money, or any less value because he doesn't have money. It's your value is that you're made in the image of God, and what do you do with what you have? What do you do with what you've been given? You could be extremely stingy and nasty about money and be dirt poor, or you could be stingy and nasty about money and be filthy stinking rich, because I've met both kinds of people. So, take it or leave it. That's my 2 cents on when you should spend money and when not. I think if it's helpful to you, it's helpful to your family. If it gets you out in the garden and it gets you growing food, go for it. But try to keep it as simple as possible. Try to think, will this thing pay for itself? And don't be penny wise, pound foolish. If you're going to buy a tool, buy a good tool. Buy a good tool and treat it hopefully pretty well. I do pretty well at buying the good tools, but I don't always treat them as well as I should, because I tend to get distracted in the middle of a job. I'll discover bees up in a tree or something and end up leaving my machete in the woods and then not finding it for 3 months. But but you have people, you have saints that were royalty who would out of their wealth would take care of the poor. You also have saints like Saint Francis who pledged themselves to poverty, but they preached the gospel of the kingdom. So you've got, you know, it's where you are and what your relationship is to your family and to God and to money and everything that's kind of important. It's not necessarily if you have it or not. But if you buy decent tools and you say, okay, I'm gonna really use this tool. I want a tool that's not going to break. Just go ahead and buy a decent tool. If the weeds are absolutely out of control in your garden, and you want to go buy a scythe for $200 and you learn how to scythe, that could be great. You could scythe. I've done a lot of scything. Or you could say, I'm going to get a string trimmer and I'm going to string trim. Fine, go for it. If it really helps you, you know. And if it gives you more time to do the things that you love, or to be helpful to others, or spend time with your family, you know, don't worry about it. But don't just go buy the cheapest Chinese tools that you could possibly buy because you're saving money, because those things just break repeatedly over and over and over again, and you're just throwing junk away, and you don't want to throw junk away. It's not a really good use of resources to buy junk and then to just throw junk away. Good old tools, often you can get a the shovel head. An old shovel head from one of those old shovels lasts a really long time, but if you buy a cheap shovel, it'll bend and ding, and it doesn't hold a good edge on it. A good old shovel will hold an edge, and often the handle wears out. You'll wear 3 or 4 handles out, and that head will still be just fine. Same thing goes for those good old gardening hoes. They used to be made out of really good metal. You could use it, use it, use it, use it, use it. Yeah, buy once, cry once. That's it. Buy once, cry once. So, my philosophy, minimalist gardening, is basically let's rethink how we keep things simple and what we're doing with the resources that we have, and how we can kind of get back to those base principles of what is our goal. Like I've talked about with food forests. You want a food forest? You don't have to do the elaborate planning. You don't have to hire this and do that, the other thing. You start attacking it one bite at a time. You plant clumps of trees. If you don't like anything later, you can cut it down with a chainsaw. You start your own trees. You start your own things from cuttings. I just started pulling some of the air layers that we did on the Thai mulberry out in the food forest, and it grew beautiful, beautiful roots inside of our air layer pods. So I started potting them today. I tested the first couple to see if they had taken, and sure enough they did well. So I'm gonna just go ahead and pull the rest of them and plant them. I could have paid $39 a piece for Thai mulberry trees, or I could start 20 or 30 of them and plant them all over the place, and I could start even more and share them with other people, or sell them in my nursery and make that start to roll. It becomes a asset. Plus we get lots and lots of fruit. So minimalist gardening, thank you all for those of you who have bought it already. There's a link at the top of the chat, and I'll put a link below this video. Minimalist gardening, please get a copy if you don't have it. If you like the tips that I give you, I think you'll find it useful. I'm going to run through this really quickly. Here are the chapters: complexity, engineers versus Rastas, and remembering the point. I compare complicated engineered systems to how the Rastafarians were growing down in the Caribbean, and it's a very interesting comparison. And then I talk about raised beds for an entire chapter, different methods of raised beds, different ideas on raised beds, how to grow in the ground, how to grow in beds. I talk about 3, de-junking your garden, just getting rid of the extra garbage. 4, I talk about free fertilizer. I cover a lot of different fertilizers and how you can make them, how you can get them. Number 5 is watering made easy, so how you can maximize your watering. Number 6 is you can do everything with a machete. So keeping your tools simple. Number 7 is grow the simple stuff. How do you figure out what's the best bang for the buck in your garden? That's what I talk about in Grow the Simple Stuff. Number 8 is grapes on trees and other stories. That's some interesting methods from the past that you don't hear much about anymore. Number 3 is gardening without money. So let's say you just don't want to invest anything in your garden whatsoever. Maybe you're completely and utterly broke. Maybe you don't even have any land. Gardening without money. I cover that as well. And number 10 is year-round food. How do you keep that grocery budget down through the year with simple methods, not with a huge amount of canning and freezing, etc. And number 11 is putting it all together. So it's the idea on minimalism. It's not about stripping your life down to complete emptiness, but it's about getting back to the base principles that are successful and getting your gardening life together. So that is Minimalist Gardening. Please pick up a copy if you don't have it. I recommend it because I think it will help you. Thank you very much, Photo G1500, for the super chat. 2 questions. Any of your books now or will be in hardcover? That's a very good question. I've thought about doing this. I actually have a contact that works for a leather binding company. And we have talked about doing a leather edition of the 5 Good Guide books. A limited edition, leather edition. Now that's like an investment. These are like higher quality than the Franklin Press versions. That's what they do. Very, very high quality leather bound books that will last a century. I don't know that I'm that special, but if there was enough people interested, I might do a leather bound edition of the Good Guides. Probably with additional notes that I would add. As for regular hardcovers, getting the hardcover printing is quite expensive, so I have not done it yet. But if enough people wrote me and said, yes, I want hardcovers, I would look into it. I'd do the research and figure it out. I like hardcovers. I buy hardcovers when I can get them. So that's a good question. You make me think about it again. I haven't looked at it in quite a while, but the printing options have gotten better than they used to be when I started. Number 2. In hardpan red clay, where do I invest in starting an orchard beside lime buggy? Planting heirloom fruit and citrus forest. Okay, that's a good question. Yes, definitely a lime buggy. If you've got hard red clay, you're probably going to want to make sure that you spread lime, but you don't want to spread lime that has magnesium in it in most clay soils. If I understand correctly, the magnesium tends to bind the soil up further, so if you were to throw dolomitic limestone on it, it might not be correct. You don't want extra magnesium. It makes your clay tighter. You want the calcium without it, so you want to get an ag lime that is not carrying the magnesium. In starting an orchard, I would first of all buy good quality trees. Buy good quality trees. Don't skimp on buying your trees. Like Dave Wilson Nurseries. Whoever distributes Dave Wilson Nurseries, the Dave Wilson nursery trees are really good, but I have bought from other orchards that were cheap and the trees were not good and the trees died. Or they just failed to thrive well. I would buy good bare root trees if possible and plant them in the late winter, early spring. Your citrus trees, just get good quality citrus. You're not going to get those bare root, obviously. Good quality citrus. If you're in an area that is prone to frost, make sure that you have a plan for protecting those citrus for at least the first 3 to 4 years. Because a citrus may say that it's cold hardy to 20 degrees, but that is for a tree that is grown up. For a baby tree, that it'll split and kill them. I had citrus that were supposed to be cold hardy that died. Most everybody in my area that planted satsuma trees over the last couple of years has had all of them died. The last 3 years, it's gotten down to the mid-teens, at least one night overnight, and that's enough to kill a little satsuma, but it might not kill a big satsuma. There's still big satsumas around, but they were ones that happened to have been planted by people that planted them and were really lucky with some warm winters while they were growing up. There's a lot of people forget that you need to cover and baby these trees to begin with. I would also make sure that your drainage is decent. If your drainage is not good on clay, it will rot the roots of those trees and they will suffer. So you may want to mound up the areas that you're going to plant on if you have poor drainage. This works really well for avocados and some other plants that are not very tolerant of having wet feet. So you may want to earth move right from the beginning. Hire somebody with a tractor or bobcat or something to come over in there and make you some nice wider mounds that are a little higher than the rest of the ground so the drainage isn't a problem. Or you can cut some canals through it. It just really depends on how bad it is, if there's drainage issues or not. You would also probably want to get a lot of wood chip mulch if you can, or whatever other materials you can mulch with to begin with, to get a good start on it, because the trees will fight with the grass when you first put them in. If you have a way to do that, even if it means putting down a weed barrier like Stefan Subkowiak does in the permaculture orchard. He got some really heavy weed barrier and he planted his trees in it and kept the grass away from them, and they grew much better when they were young. So a couple of thoughts there. I hope that's useful to you, and thank you very much for the super chat. Chicken Farmer Plus says, have 30 mulberry trees growing on the property. Only knew of one until I sent the kids to explore the property, and they came back with a container of berries. Those are good kids. Keep those kids. Good job, kids. My kids always find cool stuff. Alex says, thanks for autographing mine I bought from you. Hey, anytime. I really appreciate it. I don't know that my autograph is ever going to be worth anything, but I do like to sign my name to my work, and usually try to give a blessing to whoever's gotten it. So thank you. I appreciate that. John Henson says, with biochar, I need no fertilizer. Yeah, you know, a biochar is really good at increasing the cation exchange capacity of the soil, and it can hold on to nutrients. So I don't know that I've ever tried just having biochar with no fertilizer, but I did try charged biochar with no fertilizer. I charged it first and then put it in the ground. So Amy says, free plants for everyone, my first D to the G book. Well, thank you very much. Carl says, save your grocery store scraps too. A lot of that can be regrown easily at home. Oh yeah, that's good. Definitely. Adventure Bob says, my dog steals tomatoes daily. Clearly he didn't get the hint when I shot the rabbits. Do you see what I did to the rabbits? Do you want to be a rabbit? Charge that charcoal with your chicken waste. Oh yeah. Daryl says, I just bought corn from you. Oh yeah, did you see? That next round of landrace corn. Man, the first round of ears that I pulled was looking all right. The second round of ears really looks good. So I hope that does great for you. That's a grain corn. We're going to grind some. We have a little grinder attachment that attaches to the KitchenAid mixer that my wife got as a wedding present when we got married. So speaking of decent tools, that KitchenAid mixer has been in use for 21 years. So Ross says, David, you should try some of Jan's old Florida red mulberry hybrid. She's done a lot of work to preserve those trees. Please send me an email and tell me where I would find her. I'm not familiar with her. David at floridafoodforests.com. Another thing I'll tell you I don't mind spending money on. I don't mind spending money on education. I don't mind spending money on books if it's going to be useful to me. If it's something that's going to be useful. I've told you guys before, I once realized I could not figure out how to mix skin colors properly with paint to save my life. I was always fighting with it, never getting the skin colors correct. I never felt like I had the exact right thing, so I paid for a $100 course from a professional artist that was just a quick color mixing course, and it taught me more in the 6 hours or so I invested into it than I had gotten from a couple of semesters of college in art. So yeah, I don't mind spending money on education, and I do have a book budget. I read 2 to 3 books a week usually, depending. Sometimes I'll end up reading a really big book and it'll last me 3 weeks. Bizwiz says we got the Florida Guide to Gardening back when we first discovered D to the G. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. That book, Totally Crazy Easy Florida Gardening, has really paid dividends for a lot of people. I'm very glad that I wrote it. It has been a consistent seller, and it has probably grown many, many, many thousands and thousands of pounds of food. There's probably hundreds or even thousands of gardens that have been planted because of that book, because people email me or tell me about it all the time. I grew this and it worked. I grew this and it worked. I took your advice and it worked. And I said, well, the only reason it worked was because I killed a whole ton of plants to make that book. That was years of fighting that went into that book. And it was like, here's how you could grow plants that live in Florida. Plant these and you will have success. I should do some talks on Florida gardening here pretty soon. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about saving money and talk about minimalist gardening. Soft leather covers would be cool. I don't know where you would find a printer that would do it, but that would be cool. For biochar comments, are any of you throwing fire pit contents into compost to activate the homemade char and boost potassium content at the same time? I've done that. I think that's a good idea. I also throw it in the bottom of swamp water barrels, compost a whole bunch of weeds and manure or whatever else I have available, and throw a bucket of biochar in the bottom and let it soak. Carl says, I live in a place that's called Red Hills due to all the red clay. It's actually quite nutrient rich if you can break it up. Mulch and wood chips help a lot, especially if you can till them. Yeah, deep mulching on top of clay really does a big difference. Amy says, likewise, I cannot throw seeds in the garbage even if they're not fit for my climate. They all go in the ground. I understand. Photo G says, I'm 100 miles to your west. Snowmageddon got me. Oh, yeah. That was nuts. It was at least 8 inches of snow. It was crazy. Joe says, it pays to know your wild edibles. Your weeds could be edible. Yes, definitely. Good idea. Planting close to a house or a thick wall that has some thermal mass can help hold the heat a bit. Yeah, I saw a satsuma tree growing next to a bank. And it was growing beautiful, and it went through the snow apocalypse and everything. Didn't look like it was touched, but other trees really, really got burned. John says you can charge your charcoal with anything, including your wood ash, crushed and powdered eggshells, etc. Yeah, I like it. Spending money on a book that you never read is a terrible, interesting idea. I have had some books that I thought I was going to get around to reading and I never read. I'm trying to get through here. God Explains says, I bought some mulberry cuttings online from Jan. Jan's best mulberry 37 was steep, but I got 6 trees with incredible genetics, 3 to 4 foot tall, only a few months later. That's great. Yeah, I mean, fruit trees are generally a good investment. They really are, especially if you keep them alive and you take care of them, because they start paying you dividends after a few years. And they keep going and going and going and going. Photo G 1500 says, are you selling fruit trees this fall? I got shell from Randall. I got cassava from you in Pensacola. Yeah, I will be selling fruit trees at Scrubfest. Scrubfest 4 is coming up. The tickets just went up for sale recently. Sam is organizing all the ticket sales and everything. And let me see if I can send you that link. That's going to be, this time I'm actually bringing trees for sale. In the past, I hadn't done that, but this time I am going to actually set up my entire nursery booth, as well as all of Sam's stuff that'll be for sale. Plus, I think Seed the Stars are going to be there. My daughter has all of her seeds that are going to be for sale, so it's going to be it's going to be an awesome food forest sale. But I also got multiple really good speakers to come this time as well, and we've been doing really good with getting good speakers. So we've got good speakers again. But some different speakers. I got Stan DeFreitas, the guy that wrote the original Florida gardening book. He's my Florida gardening mentor because when I was 8 years old, I read his book and it got me really into Florida gardening. And he is actually going to come and speak. He's in his early 70s now. He's super sharp. He's very funny. He's still at it. Like, I was so glad I got in touch with him and I said, hey man, your book got me started in gardening. Would you come to Scrub Fest and talk? And he's like, yeah, I'd do that. I was like, you would? No way. He still lives in Florida, so he's coming out. It's going to be great. We've also got Elise Pickett from the Urban Harvest. She's a really good Florida gardener. She's going to be speaking. It's gonna be good. I just put the link. That is Scrubfest 2025. Let's see. G'day from Queensland, Australia. Kind of skipping through here. We're over an hour and 15 minutes. I kind of get excited about being a cheapskate, so. Yeah, definitely better than bad speakers. We've had some really sharp people speak at Scrubfest. I'm going to be talking about how to cut your grocery budget, and I have some novel ideas I think you'll enjoy. So I'm gonna call this this stream, and I thank you all for joining me. This is the book Minimalist Gardening. If you don't have it, please get a copy. You will find it very useful. It will save you. It'll help you break through analysis paralysis. It'll help save you money in your garden. It will help you make gardening more fun rather than a chore. So, yeah, you can pick up the book. There is a link at the top of the chat. And I will also put a link below this video for those of you that are watching later. I'm sorry about my puffy eyes tonight. There's still like Sahara dust or something going through, so I just look kind of beat. But it's not as bad as it has been, so this is good. Yeah, no hurricanes. We pray against hurricanes for sure. Joe, thank you for the super chat. Joe says, have you ever tried turning corn into corn smut, injecting water to the ears of corn and letting the humidity and the heat do their stuff? A kilo of corn here costs 12 pesos. A kilo of corn smut costs 130. Well, it seems like a good investment to grow it then. I had some of it grow on one of my ears this year, but I've never eaten it. It just looks so disgusting. But I've heard it's delicious. So, no, I haven't tried it. But if you're growing corn, try it. That sounds like a really good, it sounds like a really good way to value add to your corn if people want to buy it. So, yeah. So, oh, thank you, Ross. Much appreciated. Photo G says, spent a little on compost with grays on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I've done that too. It has cost me since. Yeah, it cost me. Oh, it costs. It costs. It's terrible. It's terrible. I tried to be cheap, but it made my wife weep. I turned off the AC and had to do a lot more laundry. I decided that gas was too expensive, and I tried to make my own. Burned down my favorite barn and almost burned my home. Sometimes it just don't make sense. Sometimes you can't buy, you just have to rent. When you're in a hole, just stop digging. Sometimes cheap will break your heart. If you want something that'll make your garden fine, the only good investment costs $14.99. Minimalist gardening, folks. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you for the support. Thank you for buying my books. I really do appreciate it, and it is very satisfying to see all the wonderful reviews and people that have been helped by it, and to know that this weird, strange niche that I have ended up in, the one thing I'm really good at, talking and writing about gardening, has actually been useful to other people. It is useful to be useful. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the evening, and until next time, may your thumbs always be green.